The war had stripped away every trace of normality, leaving Europe a landscape of ruins and shadows. For German women taken prisoner, the thought of capture carried with it visions of punishment and humiliation, not relief. They expected the brutality of victors, the cold machinery of revenge, the silent reminder that they had lost. Yet when they were marched into American custody, a different reality waited. The story of their first shower on American soil is not just about water and soap. It is about the collision of two worlds, one built on despair, and the other unexpectedly offering dignity. Imagine the weight they carried as they stepped into captivity. Bombed cities etched into memory, hunger gnawing at their bodies, the echo of loss in every heartbeat. They braced themselves for more suffering. But what unfolded was not cruelty. It was something far stranger, almost impossible to comprehend. Clean water flowed, soap lathered, and for the first time in years, their bodies felt human again. That moment of astonishment, so simple in form, yet profound in meaning, would remain with them forever, a reminder that even in war's darkest shadow, humanity could appear in the most unexpected places. They were rounded up in silence, their possessions stripped down to the barest essentials, and marched under the watch of soldiers who spoke a language foreign and sharp to their ears. Each step toward the transport ships felt like a march into the unknown. For many of these women, the journey itself was laced with dread. Stories circulated in hushed tones about what awaited them on foreign soil. Would they be starved as punishment? Would they face retribution for the horrors their country had unleashed? The sea voyage stretched endlessly, and every crashing wave against the hull seemed to echo their fears. Days blurred into nights as they crossed the Atlantic, confined in cram. Headquarters that reminded them of the war's suffocating grip. Some prayed silently, others stared blankly at the water, as though it might swallow their anxieties whole. They imagined American camps as grim extensions of captivity, where punishment would be relentless, where their status as both women and enemies would strip them of all dignity. The unknown weighed heavier than chains. And yet, beneath the fear, a flicker of curiosity remained. What would life truly be like behind the fences of America? None of them could have imagined that their arrival would hold not cruelty, but a bewildering glimpse of compassion that would leave them questioning everything they thought they knew about their captors. When the shoreline of America finally emerged, it felt unreal, as though they had drifted into another world entirely. The docks stretched out with an order and calmness that seemed impossible after years of rubble and smoke in their homeland. Instead of angry mobs or soldiers thirsting for vengeance, there were uniforms that looked disciplined but strangely unthreatening. As the women were led off the ships, their eyes caught details that unsettled them with their gentleness. Neat rows of trucks, the smell of food drifting from somewhere nearby, even the sight of towns in the distance that looked untouched by war. Everything felt intact, unscarred, a jarring reminder of what had been lost in Germany. At the camp gates, they expected the cold clang of iron and a descent into darkness, but the barracks were startlingly clean, the fences straight and almost clinical. Some guards even nodded politely, their expressions absent of scorn. It was not kindness, not exactly, but a restraint that confused them. Could this really be captivity? They had braced themselves for cruelty, yet the first hours in America offered something far stranger. An ordered environment where Val did not feel like a daily gamble, and that quiet realization was both a comfort and a mystery. The first mornings in the camp unfolded with an unsettling rhythm, one that none of the women had anticipated. Instead of chaos or deprivation, There was a strict but predictable order. They were given uniforms that, while plain, were clean and intact. Meals came at regular hours, food served in portions larger than many had seen in years, simple but nourishing, almost decadent compared to the meager scraps of wartime Germany. Some tasted bread that was soft and fresh. Others held steaming mugs of coffee in their hands with disbelief, the warmth seeping into bodies long accustomed to hunger and cold. Daily life revolved around routine work, gardening, sewing, cooking, or helping with maintenance inside the camp. These tasks were not framed as punishment, but as structure, a way to fill the long hours. Discipline was firm, but it lacked the cruelty they feared. Guards barked orders occasionally, but punishment was rare and violence absent. Slowly, their minds began to wrestle with the paradox: captivity that offered stability, fences that contained but did not crush. Yet amid this uneasy adjustment, rumors began to circulate of something that stirred more anxiety than relief. Word spread that soon they would be led to the bathhouse, and with it, a wave of fear that none dared speak aloud. The whispers began quietly, passed from bunk to bunk in nervous tones, until the entire barracks buzzed with unease. The Americans were preparing them for showers, the guards had said. For outsiders, this might have sounded harmless, even merciful. But for women who had lived under the shadow of the Reich, the word shower carried a darker echo. They knew the stories, had heard of the camps where prisoners were marched toward false bathhouses, never to emerge again. The mere suggestion of lining up for such a thing tightened their throats and quickened their hearts. Some tried to dismiss the fear, insisting that America was not Germany, that these camps were not death factories. Yet the thought lingered like smoke in the back of their minds. Were the guards' polite gestures a mask for something far more sinister? No one voiced the terror fully, but it was there in the silence that spread when the subject arose. What awaited them beyond those doors? Clean water, or something far worse? Until they saw it for themselves, the uncertainty gnawed at them, heavier than any chain. They lined up in silence, each step carrying the weight of dread they dared not name. The gravel crunched beneath their shoes as the guards motioned them forward, their faces unreadable. For the women, the short walk to the bathhouse stretched endlessly, every second thick with the memory of whispered horrors. Some clasped their hands tightly together, muttering silent prayers. Others kept their eyes fixed on the ground, unwilling to glimpse what waited ahead. The structure loomed larger with every step, plain and unremarkable to the outside eye, yet to them it might as well have been a chamber of fate. The air smelled faintly of soap, but that only deepened their unease. Was it genuine or a cruel disguise? The line shuffled forward, hearts racing faster than footsteps, each woman imagining what might come when the doors shut behind them. A few exchanged nervous glances, searching desperately for reassurance, but finding none. Every motion of the guards seemed exaggerated, every pause pregnant with menace. By the time they reached the entrance, a silence had fallen so deep it was almost suffocating. Crossing that threshold, they braced themselves for the worst, convinced that survival was no longer certain. The door closed behind them with a hollow thud, and for a moment the world stood still. Every muscle tightened, breaths came shallow, and eyes darted across the tiled room searching for hidden threats. Then came the hiss of pipes, sharp, metallic, unnerving. Some flinched, clutching each other's arms, bracing for agony. But instead of poison or choking fumes, the first droplets of water struck their skin, cool and clean. Gasps escaped into the air, sharp with disbelief. Slowly the stream thickened, pouring down in steady warmth, washing away the grime of years. One woman raised trembling fingers to her face, touching lather where real soap foamed against her skin. her tears mixing with the water in a confusion of grief and relief. The room filled not with screams, but with muffled sobs and nervous laughter, a chorus of emotions too tangled to separate. Some stood frozen, unable to trust what their senses told them, while others surrendered to the unfamiliar comfort, scrubbing with frantic energy as though trying to erase the war itself. The shock of simple cleanliness felt overwhelming, almost cruel in its gentleness. For in that moment, they realized captivity in America was not a descent into death, but an unexpected, bewildering return to life. When the water finally ceased and the women stepped out, their skin carried a freshness they had nearly forgotten existed. The faint scent of soap clung to them, so ordinary to Americans yet almost unimaginable to those who had come from bombed-out towns and filthy cellars. In Germany, water had often been icy, rationed, or fouled with debris. Soap was a treasure, sometimes traded like currency, sometimes entirely absent. Here, in a foreign land that was supposed to be hostile, they had been given both in abundance. The contrast left them unsteady, as if they had stumbled into a dream. Memories surfaced of washing in freezing rivers during winters, of wiping soot and dust with nothing but rags, of going to bed with the stink of war on their skin because there was no choice. Now warmth had seeped into their bones, a simple kindness that felt more shocking than cruelty would have. Some whispered that it was a trick, that surely punishment must follow such indulgence. Yet the truth was far stranger. The United States had chosen to offer them a comfort their homeland could no longer provide, and that comfort unsettled them more than deprivation ever had. Days passed, and the showers became part of a rhythm that none of the women had expected to find in captivity. At first, each time carried with it the same flicker of dread, but gradually the fear loosened its grip, replaced by something resembling relief. They learned that this ritual was not a cruel trick, but a routine, woven into the order of camp life. Cleanliness, once a rare luxury, now became a steady presence. It was as if the very act of washing restored not only their bodies, but fragments of dignity that the war had stripped away. The barracks filled with quiet conversations after each visit, laughter even, though hesitant at first. They compared the softness of their skin, the smell of soap lingering on their hands, marveling at sensations they had forgotten belonged to ordinary life. For many, it was the first time in years that they felt remotely human, no longer defined only by loss and survival. The camp was still a prison, but within its fences they found a rhythm that dulled the sharp edge of fear. Slowly, against all expectations, they began to adjust to a captivity that carried with it the unsettling weight of kindness. Years later, when they spoke of their captivity, the memories of barbed wire and watchtowers faded into the background, but the image of that first American shower never left them. It was not simply the sensation of water on skin or the lather of soap between their fingers. It was the shock of being treated as human when they had expected the opposite, a dissonance so sharp it carved itself into memory. For women who had braced themselves for cruelty, the discovery of unexpected compassion felt almost unbearable, as if their captors had granted them a gift they no longer believed they deserved. Some described the moment with tears, recalling how the water seemed to wash away not only dirt, but a portion of their fear. Others spoke of it with disbelief, confessing that they had questioned their own senses, convinced it was a fleeting illusion. Yet all agreed on one truth. That simple act of bathing became the symbol of their captivity in America. Not the fences, not the guards, but the startling realization that dignity could be offered in the unlikeliest of places. It remained a memory that defined their understanding of humanity's contradictions long after the war was over.